Welcome, chess enthusiasts. We're about to dive into a fascinating chess puzzle from the game between International Master Ire Kilik, also known as Dr. Rex Stranger, and candidate Master Tikhon, known as Creative 68. See if you can unravel the strategy for white to win. Take a moment and let's get started. In this fascinating position, black appears to have the upper hand with a knight and a rook against white's bishop and two pawns. However, with white's aggressive pawn structure and a well-placed queen, the scales might tip in white's favor. Let's explore a tempting but not best sideline where white moves the bishop to f6. White opens with an aggressive bishop move, seemingly setting up a fork on queen and rook. In response, black's queen boldly captures a central pawn, ignoring the threat. White follows through, snatching the rook on h8, but this is not enough. Black immediately recaptures. White then executes a pawn capture on f7, but the tides have turned. Black's remaining rook slides over to f8, mitigating the threat and leaving white in a precarious position. At this point, black is in control, almost guaranteeing a win. With an active knight and a powerful queen controlling key squares, black has a clear advantage. Meanwhile, white's advanced pawn on f7 feels more like a liability than a strength. We're heading back to the initial position now. White's queen makes a brilliant move to g4, unleashing a dangerous discovered attack and adding pressure to black's position. If black attempts to equalize by capturing white's pawn on d5 with the queen, the situation could worsen. Black's pawn takes the pawn on e6, but this allows white's rook to capture black's defensive knight on f5. Black captures back the rook with the pawn. This, however, exposes black's king as white's queen swoops in for a check by capturing the pawn on h4. The black king slips away to g8, only for white's queen to continue the onslaught by capturing the rook on h8, again putting black in check. The game is likely to unfold in the following manner. In an effort to evade danger, black's king moves to f7, but white's queen relentlessly continues the attack, soaring to h7 for another check. In a decisive position, white's queen and bishop exert tremendous pressure on black's vulnerable king. The sequence of relentless checks could end in a checkmate, leaving black's king cornered with no safe havens, a commanding position for white indeed. Despite black's rook offering some counterplay, the position is dominated by white's queen and bishop. They exert immense pressure on black's king, making it difficult for black to find a solid defense. Welcome, chess enthusiasts. Today we are delving into a captivating chess puzzle from a game between Grandmasters Kolowice Tiaspeti and Alexei Sarana, also known as May 6 in X time. Your challenge is to unearth the winning strategy for white. Let's get started. In this fascinating position, black seems to have the upper hand with a well-placed knight on b6, a pawn on d5 contesting center control, and a rook actively positioned on d4. Meanwhile, white's knight on f7 is eyeing the black pawn on h7, but the situation is far from simple. Despite these challenges, white has tactical opportunities to flip the script. Let's take a closer look. White initiates an unexpected series of maneuvers by advancing their pawn to e6, delivering a check to the black king. Black's king retreats to e7, trying to stop the pawn. Then white surprises everyone with a brilliant play. The knight leaps to d6, threatening a fork on f5, and also stopping the black rook from intervening at e4. At the same time, it's a sacrificial play. Let's see what happens if the black king takes the bait and captures white's knight. White pushes their pawn to e7, intensifying the threat of promoting to a queen. The dynamics have indeed shifted drastically as the pawn's progress threatens promotion. In the concluding position, white has successfully turned the tables with their e7 pawn poised to promote. Despite being a knight down, white's threatening pawn and active rook on e2 give them a decisive advantage. Black is on the back foot, struggling to deal with white's imminent threats. This clearly demonstrates the power of advanced passed pawns and the potential they hold in dictating the course of a game. In the current position, black enjoys a knight's advantage and has a rook actively placed on d4. However, white's menacing pawn on e7 is just one step away from promotion, potentially turning the tide of the game. Welcome, chess enthusiasts. Today we're diving into an intriguing chess puzzle from a game between Grandmaster's Hand of Prince and MSB2. Your challenge, find the winning move for white. Take a moment to think it through. In this fascinating position, black has a seemingly fortified setup with rooks on h8 and d8, and the king tucked away on c8. The black queen stands powerfully on d5. However, white's queen on f5 and bishop on e5 bear down on black's position, offering potential for counterplay. Interestingly, White is ahead in material with an extra pawn and a bishop for knight, presenting a slight advantage. Despite black's solid structure, there's a sense of vulnerability that white can seek to exploit. White initiates an action by capturing black's pawn on c4, opening up the position. Black's queen reacts by shifting to a5. In a brilliant maneuver, white moves the rook to b1, setting a hidden trap. Black, seemingly oblivious, captures white's bishop on e5. White, undeterred, responds not with a simple recapture, but with a rook capture on e5. A fantastic move that's more than meets the eye. Black's queen hastily retreats to c7. White's proactive play continues as the rook advances to c5, putting the pressure on black's queen. Black succumbs to the pressure, capturing white's rook on c5, but this leads to a dire consequence. White's pawn captures the queen on c5, a powerful sequence that transforms the game dynamics completely. In this explosive endgame, white holds a commanding lead, with a menacing queen on f5, a strongly advanced pawn on c5, and a ready-to-strike rook on b1. Despite black's attempts to regroup, the material imbalance and aggressive positioning of white's pieces overwhelmingly tilts the game in white's favor. With a significant material advantage, white is in command here. The white queen and advanced pawn on c5 are particularly menacing. Yet, black's rooks have potential for coordination, and the knight on d7 could play a crucial role in defending black's position. Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into a captivating chess puzzle from the game between international masters Joel Banawa, also known as JB2 Mix, and Artem Uskov, who goes by Chess Art Us. It's white's turn to move, so put on your thinking caps and let's see if we can find the best solution together. In this complex position, black's king is somewhat exposed on g8, while his pieces are significantly undeveloped. Despite this, black holds a strong pawn structure and has centralized his queen on d4. White's forces are more active, with his queen menacingly positioned on h6 and bishops eyeing both flanks. However, the white king on f1 isn't entirely secure either. This intricate scenario demands careful navigation. Now let's explore a tempting alternative. White moving the rook to e1. This, however, invites trouble. Let's see why. At first glance, moving the rook to e1 seems logical, aiming to increase control over the central files. However, this allows black's bishop to capture white's advanced pawn on e5, creating a potential threat. White can retake with the bishop, but this opens up an avenue for black's queen. Indeed, the queen captures the exposed bishop on e5, presenting a strong counterattack. White might then try to distract black with a pawn advance to h4, hoping for some mischief on the king side. But black skillfully sidesteps any potential threats, moving his queen to g7, significantly bolstering his king's safety. In this position, black holds a minor material advantage with an extra pawn. However, both kings are somewhat exposed, and the pieces are scattered. There's tension in the center and on the king side, creating a dynamic and intricate scenario that requires precise play from both sides. Now, let's circle back to the initial position. White's knight leaps to f3, a brilliant move that immediately steps up the pressure. It's a key strategic adjustment, centralizing the knight while also covering important squares and adding power to white's setup. If black were to move the queen to c4, checking white's king and creating a fork, it wouldn't solve black's problems. White could easily sidestep this by moving the king to g1, escaping the check. Black's queen seizes the opportunity and captures white's bishop on e4. In response, white's knight boldly strides to g5, significantly reducing the safety of black's king. Should black try to move the queen to c4, giving a check and hoping for a fork, it wouldn't alleviate black's difficulties. In that case, white could just relocate the king to g1, neatly sidestepping the check. Black's queen ventures to d3, delivering a check. The white king nonchalantly steps aside to g1, nullifying the threat. In order to prolong the inevitable, the black queen moves to h3, only to be captured by white's pawn. Black's rook then moves to e8, but white's queen swoops in, capturing the pawn on h7 with check. Black's king retreats to f8, but it's too late. White's queen captures the pawn on f7, delivering a decisive checkmate. Welcome, chess enthusiasts! Today we're going to examine an intriguing chess puzzle from a game between FM Strong Kagana K1 Laller and GM Benjamin Bach, playing with his Twitch account. Try your hand at finding the best move for black in this complex situation. In this challenging position, white holds a material advantage with two bishops against black's rook. White's pieces, especially the well-positioned bishop on e5 and knight on d5, are actively placed, applying pressure. However, black's opportunity to move might turn the tables. Black's queen makes a daring sacrifice, leaping onto h2 to give check. In response, white's king is forced to take the queen on h2. Then black's knight swoops in, capturing white's queen on f3 with a check and simultaneously threatening white's bishop. The white king sidesteps the check, moving to g2. Without missing a beat, black's knight claims another victim, capturing the bishop on e5. This sequence of bold moves has greatly enhanced the safety of black's king. Black has turned the tide and is now in a nearly winning position. With an extra rook and a pawn against white's bishop, black exerts control over the board. White's knight is well placed, but it's offset by black's active knight and well-structured pawn formation. Black holds a considerable advantage here, with a decisive material advantage. Today, we will dive into an intriguing chess puzzle from the game between Grandmasters José Martínez Alcántara, also known as Contra Jaco, and Colucci Nonti Aspetti. You're invited to try and find the optimal move for black. Take a moment, think about it. In this complex position, white has a menacing pawn structure on the king side, threatening to break through black's defenses. The white rooks are well coordinated, applying pressure along the f-file, while the white bishop oversees the entire board from g2. Despite the tension, black's knight holds a crucial outpost on e4, countering white's aggressive setup. Let's examine a tempting sideline where black's knight captures the pawn on g5. Black's knight makes a risky decision, opting to snatch white's pawn on g5. As a response, white pushes their pawn to c5, forcing an exchange in the center. Black accepts the challenge, capturing the pawn with its own on c5. Then, white's rook slides over to g4, increasing the pressure on black's knight. In an attempt to keep the balance, black's rook steps in and moves to e5, covering the knight. But white brings their other rook to f6, amplifying threats against black's position. In this position, material is balanced, with both sides having intense dynamics. Black's knight on g5 has a precarious position, and white's rooks are well coordinated, applying significant pressure. Black's move can shape the game strongly, requiring careful judgment. Let's revert back to the initial position. With a clever twist, black's knight leaps to g3, throwing a wrench into white's plans and significantly altering the battlefield dynamics. If white attempts to respond by moving the rook to g4, it wouldn't alleviate their problems. In this side variation, black's knight could promptly capture white's rook on f1, worsening white's position. White's rook slides to f2, seemingly safe. However, black's knight jumps to e2, delivering a check and establishing a dangerous fork. The white rook has no choice but to capture the knight, but this leads to black capturing white's rook, significantly turning the tables. In this climactic position, black holds a decisive advantage, having an extra rook against white's bishop. The board brims with tactical opportunities, with black's rook ideally placed to harass white's less mobile pieces and exploit the somewhat vulnerable white pawns. In this position, black has a material advantage with an extra rook against white's bishop. White's pawns are more exposed and black's rooks are actively engaged, increasing the pressure on white's position.